Being a good father is a tough job. You need to provide for your family no matter what.
Jerry was a superb thief. He stole from his own business, not just one way, but a dozen ways.
You need to be a role model for your children.
He was a degenerate gambler. He was a drinker, and he kept a mistress. He had a girlfriend that he cheated on his mistress with.
But when family love turns toxic, blood ties run crimson.
I just hated him. He just tore our family apart.
You can get right with God and not be right with your fellow man. And all too often, that's what happened in that family.
My name is Steve Sharippa. I grew up in a pretty rough neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. I've seen good people turn bad and bad people turn worse. Some took contracts to carry out a hit. Some were victims of a hit. To hitmen, life and death are just part of the business. It's nothing personal. It's September 25th, 1985. Today is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. If you're a Jew, it's the day you admit to God you cannot live up to every promise you've made. But after sunset, it becomes a feast. The idea of breaking God's laws on Yom Kippur is, to the faithful, almost insane. But the clan at the heart of this story was all about crazy.
You can get right with God and not be right with your fellow man. And all too often, that's what happened in that family.
Vera and Jerry Woodman are just getting home from a family Yom Kippur dinner. But this day won't be just their Day of Atonement. It will be their final day on Earth. Two of their sons have hired hitmen to kill them.
It's a pathetic story. It's two sons to do this to their parents. I mean, you can get aggravated with your parents, you can get pissed, you can get a lot of things, but to resort to murder, to me, is much too much.
So the question is, what was this family about? What went so wrong that their children would hire people to assassinate their parents? The answer begins where these things often do, with the money.
They were conspicuously affluent, and I think it was a fetish with them. They came from working-class people in Manchester, England, where Jews were not socially prominent, and they felt that their money equaled status. And, of course, this is California. It does.
Jerry Woodman was worth a fortune, at one time anyway. He owned a company called Manchester Products. He manufactured those translucent plastic panels that provide a touch of class to fluorescent lights. Jerry had his two eldest sons, Neil and Stewart, working for him since they were 16. He's installed them in Manchester to preserve the Woodman dynasty. And also so Jerry doesn't have to send them to college. The Woodman family's great wealth is Jerry's carrot and his stick. On the books, Manchester Products is doing great. Off the books, it's a gold mine.
He was very, very good at starting businesses and making money from them and growing them. And one of the ways that he was good at it was that he would steal most of the profit and never pay taxes on it. Jerry was a superb thief. He stole from his own business, not just one way, but a dozen ways.
I know what you're thinking. Jerry wanted to take all that cash and send it to UNICEF to feed the hungry. Yeah, sure. Jerry used that money to feed his own appetites. He especially craved the 3 Bs: bookies, booze, and broads. He could never get enough, and he spent millions.
He was a gambler. He was a degenerate gambler. He just couldn't stay away from it. Cards, dice, horses, sports games. He bequeathed that to his sons. But he was more than a gambler. He was a drinker, and he kept a mistress at the Beverly Hills Hotel for many years. He had a child with one of his mistresses. He had a succession of mistresses. He had a girlfriend that he cheated on his mistress with.
So Jerry Woodman was no prize. He was a thief, a gambler, a womanizer. and a nightmare of a role model. Does that mean the guy should have a contract taken out on him by his own offspring? It's time to meet the boys, Stewart and Neil Woodman. Let's just say the apples haven't rolled too far from the family tree. Those boys have some rotten spots of their own.
Stewart is like a jellyfish in the ocean. He just goes any which way, just kind of follows along. And Stewart was overweight, didn't care about the consequences, just wanted the money and the fame.
We had somebody tell us that Stewart called his mother on his honeymoon and said he wanted to come home. I mean, what kind of guy is that, huh?
So if Stewart's just spineless, what's Neil?
Neil is the alpha dog.
Neil's a snake. He'll do anything to get whatever he wants. They were a couple of assholes.
If these guys had turned out pleasant, it'd have been a miracle. Their dad had twisted and stunted them like a pair of human bonsai trees. Even so, their toxic birthright came with some talent, too.
They had inherited a lot of their father's talent for this business. Stewart was a salesman. He could sell ice to Eskimos. Neil understood the manufacturing process. He was very good about making sure production quotas were met and expenses were kept down.
And Jerry's not completely abusive. With him, you're never sure what you're gonna get.
Gerald had two personalities. If he was your neighbor and your friend, he was the sweetest guy. But if you were a businessman, he was the toughest son of a bitch you ever dealt with.
It's usually the nasty side his family sees.
They grew up in a household where their father's word was law, and yet, as any kid does when living in a household, you know when your father's done wrong. You know when your mother is unhappy. You know when he does things that are unfair. But you can't argue with your father. And this guy was, I won't say exactly a monster, but he was the king, and he's not a very benevolent king. He wanted things done his way. But he was that way with everyone, not just his sons.
He had a peculiar sense of humor. If you knew Jerry Woodman, he was always shticking somebody. Shtick is like a needle. He was always needling somebody. And he did his thing, and his thing was whatever he wanted to do.
They didn't get along with their father, and he hated them, and they hated him.
He had no compunction whatever about humiliating them in front of the help.
You raise your right hand. With respect to the statement, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
When it all came undone, Stewart Woodman's extraordinary confession to a room full of LA cops and lawyers lays bare how a family could come apart so violently.
My father was always screaming and yelling at him. You're stupid. You can't do this right. You can't do that right. My father got no thrill out of yelling at people, unless it was he had an audience for it. But he wouldn't just yell. I mean, he just cut you to pieces. I've never ever run across anybody my entire life that went through what I went through with my father.
Eventually, the sons decide that Dad's never gonna get around to atoning for his own sins, and the only way to set things right is to handle it themselves. All they need is someone with special skills. A hitman. Brothers Neil and Stewart Woodman have had enough of their dad and his abusive shenanigans. They hit on a foolproof solution. Have Dad whacked. But even in LA, that's not something you can order in. You need contact. You need someone like Steve Homick. Homick is a bi-coastal bone breaker and a real find for the brothers. He splits his time between Las Vegas and Atlantic City, anywhere there's a need for a bit of violent muscle.
He was just one mean SOB. He had absolutely no mercy. He was just a brutal man. He was a thug.
If you're the brains behind a murder plot, it pays to be organized. You might need a team, a killer for sure, maybe lookouts, drivers. The problem is this. The pool of people who are willing to take on the task of, say, murdering someone's parents tend not to be evolution's grandest achievements. Steve Homick had a team of pea-brains and reptiles, and he was no petunia in that onion patch.
Let's be frank here. It doesn't take very much to kill another human being if you have guns and you're willing to use them.
So the brothers Grimm have hired Homick Enterprises to resolve their family's internal strife. Yeah, that's Team Homick setting up in the parking garage of this upscale condo. But how has it come to this? Here's the backstory. Jerry treats his sons like garbage, but he does eventually make them partners. The boys put up with the abuse, figuring someday they'll get their just reward. But there's more. There's a secret. The Woodman brothers have no idea how well their dad has been rewarding himself. Not even his wife Vera knows about the skim money.
He would give his whole paycheck to Vera, but the paycheck was a fraction of what he was taking out of that business.
Jerry eventually gives his boys a small taste of the skim. Manchester becomes the family loot bag. For all their suffering, the boys did stay at Manchester. Those short leases had diamond collars. So Stewart and Neil didn't stray far from Jerry's golden trough. Each took $1,000 out of petty cash each week. Big money now, even bigger then. And that was just the Woodman's candy bowl. They put in for another 8 to 10 G a week in phony business expenses. They each took $4,000 a month as a car allowance, but they drove company cars. They gassed them up on company credit cards, and then they took a fuel allowance. If there was a way to steal from your own company that the Woodmans didn't use, it probably involved work.
Up to that time, the skim had been around $1 million a year divided between the two sons and another $1 million that Jerry took.
So everything is hunky-dory. Everybody's stealing, everybody's rich. The boys hate Dad, Dad abuses them. Lots of families go on like this for years.
You're gonna kill this company.
But at 61 years of age, Jerry's reign is interrupted one fine afternoon when his heart has finally taken enough of his abuse, and it attacks him in his office.
The other pile has nothing on it. Oh, yeah. Dad, call an ambulance.
The heart attack is proof that he has one. Being Jerry, he refuses an ambulance. Being Jerry, he gets his way.
He insisted on driving himself to the hospital after he had the heart attack. That was my father.
Dad, let me go home.
He drives as he always does, like the hounds of hell are on his bumper. Jerry Woodman didn't die, of course. That would have saved his sons a lot of trouble and prison time. But he did at least decide to plan something about the future. He bought a life insurance policy on his wife, Vera, payable to Manchester Products. Meanwhile, Jerry's absence from Manchester doesn't exactly leave the place a rudderless ship. Out from under Dad's thumb, Neil and Stewart are in hog heaven.
They found themselves running the company for months, nearly a year, without him. They discovered that they didn't need him.
And now with full access to the company books, the Woodman sons discover how lopsided the partnership with Dad really is. Wouldn't you know it? Those boys have an epiphany.
They discovered that he was stealing from them, that he was taking way more than his share. They decided they weren't going to stand for this. They were going to ease him out of the business. Jerry was still recovering from this massive heart attack. They went to their mother, Vera, and they said, "Mom, don't you think it's time Dad retired?" Now, don't get us wrong, we'll pay his complete salary. He'll keep all his perks. The only thing is he doesn't have to come in. We'll take it from here. Vera thought it was a good idea. She'd like to spend some time with her husband in her declining years.
Vera might be dreaming of shuffleboard in the sunset, but Jerry's fingers are way too itchy for that.
But Jerry knew exactly what was going on. He knew his sons were trying to push him out so they could take this skim money and steal it themselves. And he wasn't about to let that happen.
Remember, Jerry's lifestyle depends on what he skims, not on what he earns. And he isn't about to give up mistresses or betting on the pony. Jerry took to the idea of letting his sons pull his hand out of the till like a vampire to a sunny day at the beach. He woke up with a powerful thirst for Manchester Products cash flow. He latched onto its jugular and started sucking even more than ever out of the company. 4 racehorses on the company dime, a 2-week all-expenses-paid trip to London for himself, Vera, and half the people on their block. By this time, Neil and Stewart are in their 30s with families and opulent lifestyles of their own. And now their father is going to bring it all crashing down. He's out of control.
I want Mr. Lucky in the first.
This is the kind of situation where a young man needs a rabbi. Lucky for the Woodman boys, they have a real one. Stephen Rubin is their friend and spiritual advisor.
Neil and Stewart told me their father was addicted to gambling, and their father was destroying their business. And no matter what they did, their father was going to drive them all into the ground, and that the only way they could save their business, their livelihoods, their families, was to remove him from having control of the business.
His boys' plans to take over Manchester set Jerry off big time. He decided that slowly bleeding the company dry wasn't causing his ungrateful sons enough pain. So he took off his belt to give them a thrashing. He served Neil and Stewart with legal papers saying he was dissolving the company, locking the doors, and selling off the machines. Financially, it made no sense. They'd all lose millions. But Jerry'd still be rich, and his broken, unemployed sons would know who was really in charge. It was mean-spirited, it was vicious, and it blew up in Jerry's face. The hitmen hiding in Jerry and Vera Woodman's underground parking lot are soldiers in a war without mercy. Jerry is nasty, abusive, and selfish. But his sons have enlisted a cutthroat named Steve Homick, and he makes Jerry look like a pussycat. According to Stewart's confession, murdering Jerry and Vera was Homick's idea.
And Steve had brought up a problem having with my father. And that's how it came about, to where he said, just let me take care of it. You won't have that problem anymore.
And Jerry makes it easy for his sons to decide he's got to go. Jerry Woodman is going to teach his sons, Neil and Stewart, a lesson by dissolving the family business Manchester Products and selling off all the machines. But it doesn't work. A new California law allows partners who don't want a business to be liquidated to buy it at liquidation prices. In other words, Neil and Stewart outfox their dad and scoop up Manchester for a song. They unhook their leashes and give Jerry the old heave-ho. Turnabout is fair play, right? Still, the son's victory comes with a heavy price. Their relationship with their mother, Vera.
Vera was the titular head of the company, and for legal reasons, controlled the stock in the company. She was the president of the company and controlled 50% of the voting stock. But she did whatever Jerry told her to do. When it came down to it, when Vera was forced to choose between supporting her sons and supporting her husband over who would control the company, she chose her husband. No woman should ever have to make that choice. It's a terrible situation to put their mother in. And when she sided with her husband, it cost her life.
There is a lawsuit, of course. Vera takes the stand against her boys. The boys win. Vera and her sons will never be able to patch things up.
What was the reason for your mother? The lawsuit could never have happened without my mother. Never would have ever happened.
How do you say that?
She owned the stock. She swore to me, she said she'll never... I remember her sitting with Neil and Anna in my office on Mason. And she's, your father's crazy. She's, I know he's nuts. He'll never, ever get his hands on the stock. At least you know that. And I moved into a house in Hidden Hills. And before I moved in, I said, "You absolutely sure there's no problems with anything?" So he had threatened before. And he said, "No, go in and move in and enjoy yourself." And a few months after I moved in, we got served with a lawsuit.
What you're saying is you felt betrayed by your mother?
Yeah, I felt betrayed by my mother.
The sons wound up with the company. Jerry wound up with his $2 million paid-for house, $750,000 in cash, and Vera's jewelry. Now, a lot of guys would have taken that and got a Palm Springs condo and, just had a very nice life for the rest of their life. Not Jerry.
Jerry was not going to take his son's victory lying down. He'd set out to ruin Neil and Stewart, and that's what he meant to do, even if he had to burn through every cent he had, and believe me, he had quite a few. He mortgaged his Bel Air mansion. He sold Vera's diamonds. He borrowed from other relatives, and he used all that dough to go into competition with his sons, Woodman Industries. His new company has only one mission.
He cut prices to the point where he knew his sons couldn't compete and make a profit. He didn't care. He was not out to make a profit. He was out to destroy them.
Jerry won't be happy until he drives his sons into bankruptcy. He doesn't stop at undercutting their prices. He also poaches their staff.
Then we started having salesmen tell us, you know, your father's offered us this, your father's offered us that. We lost several salesmen. We lost our crew, except for 3 or 4 main workers. We lost our crew of workers.
But these battles don't prevent the Woodman sons from making Manchester their cash dispenser, as it had been their dad's before them.
Stewart and Neil thought nothing of going to Las Vegas once a month and dropping 50 grand in the craps table. If they won, great, they'd buy their wives fur coats.
The Woodman boys were now living the life that Dad's larceny had held back, and they had learned how to waste money from the Michael Jordan of mindless spending. Stewart bought his wife so many fur coats, they designed a 1,400 square foot refrigerated closet just to house them. They're not so casual about losing their battle with Jerry, though. They may not have his bluster, but their war with Dad is no low-stakes craps game.
They were trying to get even with their father for a whole lifetime of abuse. They were forcing him to atone for what he had done to them, the way he had raised them, the household that they had grown up in. This, I think, was the way they justified this in their own mind.
As for Steve Homick and his team of assassins, they're just greedy and mindlessly bloodthirsty. It's hard to imagine where such people come from. Oh yeah, Las Vegas. To a gambler, all roads lead to Vegas. The Woodmans were well known on the Strip. And if you throw a lot of money around in Sin City, you're sure to meet some sinners. The Homick brothers were just the kind of snakes who like to bask in the glow of other people's cash.
Stewart's wife was extremely attractive, and they loved to go to Las Vegas. They were big gamblers. They gambled on horses. They bet basketball, football. They bet on the rise and fall of the sun. At some point when they were in Vegas, Stewart's wife met Steve, and he kind of hit on her, and that's how they got to meet Steve Homick.
Steve Homick had been an LA cop, but he never had much of a taste for law enforcement. He did enjoy the opportunity to beat up people who were in handcuffs. The LAPD wasn't so into that anymore, so Homick got the boot. But in the Gomorrah of the Mojave, Homick finds people who appreciate his talents.
He was in Las Vegas doing thuggish jobs for the mob. They would use him to break a leg or a kneecap or shoot somebody. And he was running a half a dozen other criminal enterprises on the side.
Homick and the Woodman brothers become chummy over roulette wheels and 20-point spreads. And the boys' new friend Steve finds them a way to win every single trip. Somewhere along the line, Steve, Neil, or Stewart hit on a new scheme. While the Woodmans were dropping cash in Vegas, Homick would help them recoup by burgling their houses back in L.A. Insurance would pay for the jewels the brothers said were taken, and the losers at the tables would become winners at insurance fraud.
Stewart would file an insurance claim, and the insurance company would pay off on the burglary at Stewart's house, which occurred on any number of occasions, whenever Stewart went to Las Vegas.
Like the Woodmans, Steve Homick runs a family business. Brother Bob is his partner.
Robert was a great big guy who was a member of the California bar, but who could never quite get a job in a law firm because he would go on job interviews wearing surfer shorts and a big T-shirt. He made a living stealing law books to order for law students.
When he wasn't swiping textbooks for future shysters, Robert would heist the Woodman's cars. He'd abandon them in the desert or drive them off cliffs. I know it sounds like a great hobby, but the real aim was collecting more insurance money. But the insurance scams are just a warm-up for the main event. A grudge match between parents and children with an ending that's right out of a horror movie. You might want to close your eyes. What was ugly is about to get hideous. War is raging in the Woodman family. Hostilities between father and sons have gone from bitter to vicious. And just how deep do they run? When Neil is planning his son's bar mitzvah, he decides he needs armed guards.
Neil really believed my father was going to crash through the temple in his car and sit there and watch his son get bar mitzvah. I mean, he really believed that.
This time it's Rabbi Stephen Rubin who's caught in the middle.
He was literally concerned and afraid of his father coming in and disrupting the service and ruining his son's bar mitzvah. I was the one they came to try to see if they could institute some higher level of security, let's say, for that bar mitzvah experience so that they could keep Neil's father off the premises and avoid any possibility of some kind of a scene going on that would, diminish the day for his son.
It's the bar mitzvah threat that leads Neil to turn to Steve Homick as his fix-it man. And Homick solves it in a jiffy. He hires a pair of retired cops to man the barricade. And what does Neil tell the cops to do if Granny and Grandpa storm the gates? Shoot them. In their day-to-day work, cops see a lot of dysfunction. One toxic family tends to bleed into the next, so you get cynical about the whole human race. I think if you're a police officer, just getting up in the morning could be a triumph of optimism over experience. But nothing ever skeeved those two cops out like the rich guy who wanted his parents wasted at a bar mitzvah. You remember the really weird ones. We'll see those two flatfoots again. That you can bet on. The rent-a-cops guard the bar mitzvah, but Neil's son enters manhood without gunplay. As time goes on, though, the Woodman saga goes from outrageous to truly lunatic. In trying to wipe out his son's livelihoods, Jerry just bankrupts himself. His rival company founders and Jerry's fortunes go down with the ship.
He lost everything. He lost the house. He lost most of Vera's jewelry. He was living in a rented condo in Brentwood. Very nice place, but a very big step down from where he'd been.
Neil and Stewart hope their bankrupt dad can't hurt them anymore. But Jerry figures out a way to turn his company debts into a plague on his sons for free.
So now he had a lot of time on his hands, and he used that time to make life miserable for his sons. If he needed a plumber at the house, he'd call the plumber and say, send the bill to my sons. He had the bright idea of calling up his creditors, called them up and said, just send the bill to my sons, they'll pay you this whole money with interest.
They would call my father would say, call my son, he's responsible. We were just a division of my son's company. I owned Manchester, and I gave it to them, and I started this, but they own us, so they're responsible. We had a ton of suppliers to cut us off.
Manchester's suppliers now demand cash on delivery. The boys don't have enough. The company is going down, just as Jerry intended. They only see one way out. As long as Dad's alive, he'll torment them. So now you've got the picture. Neil and Stewart want Jerry dead, and we all know why. But what about Vera? Isn't she just a victim?
We could fill the Coliseum with people who could tell you that Gerald was not a nice person, We never found anybody who could say that Vera was not a nice person.
The thing is, everybody who knows them knows the Woodman boys want their dad 6 feet under. But maybe, if their mom is killed, it'll seem like a robbery. Because 2 sons having their innocent mom whacked would just be too ugly to believe. But that's exactly what Stewart says they did.
If it was just my father who got killed, it would be much worse. It would point to us much more than if they did both.
They settle on killing their parents on Yom Kippur. Because on the Day of Atonement, they always go to that family party. But Neil and Stewart know the cops will laser in on the dirty family laundry. So they've covered their tracks. One big concern, all those phone calls they've been making to triggerman Steve Homick. The solution, payphones.
The idea was not to show any link between the Woodman brothers here in the San Fernando Valley and Steve Homick in Las Vegas. And they communicated by telephone. And what would happen is Homick would call the factory and then hang up, so there'd be no conversation. And this would be a signal. So then the boys would go to a payphone and they would call another payphone by prearrangement in Las Vegas, and they would talk.
Steve Homick and the Woodmans spent so much time running out to payphones, passers-by must have thought they were remaking Superman. But here's the thing that gets me. These guys were blowing tens of thousands of dollars on fur coats and gambling, but they wouldn't even spring for the roller quarters it would have taken to make those conversations untraceable. They charged the calls back to the company. Their hearts were black, and they were stupid. In LA, you could get away with either, but not both. By 1985, Vera and Jerry have lost the honor of hosting the family's annual Yom Kippur dinner. Jerry's bankruptcy has left them with no house to host it in. He masks it, but it stings.
Rent was paid by his son-in-law, and they gave him walking around money. They gave him a couple $1,000s a week, just so he'd have some money in his pocket. It was a big fall from grace.
Meanwhile, the Homick brothers are figuring Yom Kippur will lead to a big payday. Their plan is meticulous. Steve maps out the route from Vera's sister's dinner in Bel Air to Jerry and Vera's Brentwood home. He arranges lookouts with walkie-talkies. Not confident that one lookout would be enough, Steve Homick had a backup. Note to aspiring hitmen: everyone you involve has a tongue that might wag one day. Luckily, Mike Dominguez was a homicidal thug who generally let slugs do his talking.
Mike Dominguez was dumb as dirt. He was another guy who looked like he was sent out by Central Casting for the part of a petty thug. Dominguez would do anything Homick told him to do. And I'm sure that this is as much because he was afraid of Homick as because it was a way to make money. Steve Homick and Mike Dominguez went into a private home in Las Vegas, forced their way in at gunpoint, told the woman who owned the house if she didn't open her safe for her jewelry, they'd kill her. When she opened the safe, they killed her. And they killed the maid, and then they killed the UPS man who rang the doorbell. And they did this all for what turned out to be $5,000 worth of fake jewelry, you know, the $5,000 for melting down the settings. They would kill you as soon as look at you. So Homick and Company's plan is to pop Jerry and Vera in the garage. Now, the only thing stopping Steve Homick from getting into the garage in Jerry's building was a bike chain. No problem for a master criminal like him. So Homick snipped the chain and stuffed it into his bag. But that reptile brain isn't so attuned to thinking ahead. He left the cut link where it fell. That metal shard is no good to anyone except maybe a clever cop looking for something to link criminals to a crime. We'll get to that later. Right now, the die has been cast. The Titanic's at full speed, and the iceberg is not moving.
It's hard to overstate how important Yom Kippur is in the Jewish calendar. It's the day you confront your human weakness. You fast and offer supplications. You ask God to accept you in spite of your flaws. At sunset, at the sound of the shofar, you start anew. And then you break your fast with a big festive meal. If Jerry did any atoning that day, there's no record of what flaws he admitted to. I sure hope his conscience was clear, because he and Vera would be dead by sunrise. Deli owner Marvin Saul shares that Last Supper with the doomed Woodmans.
We were the last two people to see them alive. We were all leaving, and my wife said, you know, I really like Jerry. 20 minutes later, they were dead.
Jerry's fancy cars are long gone. Vera held on to her Mercedes, but Jerry, of course, takes the wheel. He drives home in his usual mad rush. Too bad he doesn't take a few extra minutes to make nice with Vera. Forgive his sons and himself. Make his peace with God. Jerry doesn't do anything like that. He drives fast and he's yelling, right down to his last second. So the Woodman family drama comes to a climax in a dreary garage in Brentwood, California. There's nothing Shakespearean about it. Jerry's no tragic hero, and his killers are just thugs. Dumb thugs who alerted the whole neighborhood when that gun went off. It was loud. A .357 Magnum going off in a garage sounds like a friggin' cannon. Jerry and Vera never had a chance, but killing them was easy. The most important part of the plan was how to get away with it. From the moment the slugs hit home, that part of the plan started coming off the rails. Mike Dominguez, the lookout, said he heard the shots 2 blocks away. Dominguez doesn't call the cops, but everybody else in earshot does.
If they had been professionals, they would have managed to make the getaway without being seen.
Homick has to get out of that garage like grease lightning. Steve forgets all about that piece of chain link by the gate. No time. There's a police station 2 blocks away. The Yom Kippur murder of Jerry and Vera Woodman shocks L.A. It's clearly a cold and calculated hit. An assassination that doesn't look a bit like a robbery. That was the plan, but investigator Richard Kratzley sees through it in a second.
Their jewelry was still all on them. Nothing seemed to be missing.
They had the keys in their pocket. The apartment was full of valuable things, but had not been touched.
At the time, we didn't have the slightest idea why anybody would want to hit these 2 old people, but it told us that this was an execution murder.
Salt of the earth. Vera, one of the nicest women you would ever meet.
Who could possibly want this elderly couple whacked? The cops don't even have time to scratch their heads.
Maxine, who was Stewart and Neil's older sister, comes up in her car and finds the police officers and immediately says, we know who did this. It was our brothers. It was our brother Stewart and our brother Neil.
They were just emphatic that the 2 brothers had killed Gerald and Vera, their mother and father. I mean, it was, there was no doubt in their minds that they had killed them.
Just like that, instant suspects. exactly how Neil and Stewart knew they'd be viewed.
I mean, we knew that within a couple of days that the police were going to be talking to us because it was all over the newspapers. We couldn't hide the fact that there was problems with the family.
It turns out there isn't much they can hide. The Woodman boys and Steve Homick think their plan is foolproof. But the plan had some weak spots, starting with the fools who made it. Investigators look for three things: motive, means, and opportunity. They have the motive from the get-go. Getting the other two will take some spade work. In no time, detectives piled up a mountain of circumstantial evidence. Note to the homicidal: don't go around telling the world how much you wish your victim was dead. I don't know if acting innocent helps much if you're guilty, but acting guilty is a sure way to help investigators focus. It seems that Neil and Stewart are strangely incurious about their parents' brutal murder.
It was probably a whole week. Stewart and Neil never called the police department to inquire what happened to their parents. And I've worked homicide for 14 years. I have never had a murder victim's relatives not call me within an hour the next day as soon as they found out that somebody had died. And then when we said, hey, let's set up an appointment, well, they said, fine, we'll have it at our attorney's office. Now, if you're not guilty and you had nothing to do with the murder, why would you have a corporate and a criminal attorney sitting next to you and we're asking, well, where were you the night of the murders? Oh, he's not going to answer that question. And then we kept thinking, these guys are guilty. I mean, they are guilty, we just have to prove it. I mean, that's what it was.
So now's when those two retired flatfoots reappear. The ones who were told to blow away Grandma and Grandpa if they laid siege to the Woodman bar mitzvah. Remember them? When they see the headlines about the Yom Kippur murder, they give the homicide dicks a name. The guy who posted them outside the synagogue, Steve Homick.
I kept thinking, well, let's run with him. He's our only suspect right now, and that's what we did. Steve Homick became #1 suspect.
Steve can't be placed at the crime scene right away, but his brother sure can. A witness says he distinctly remembers Robert Homick near the Woodman's condo. His scruffy look made him plenty memorable. And the CSI team finds that cut chain link in the bushes. Whoops.
The chain link was sawed in half. Somebody from our crime lab said, you find me the bolt cutters, you know, I might be able to correspond those tool marks. So when we did our search warrants, lo and behold, where'd we find the bolt cutters? Robert Homick.
Not only were the cutters found in his home, cops found the receipt that showed he bought them at the hardware store just down the street. Does it get any easier?
Robert Homick was done.
You got Robert, you got Steve. All that's left is to connect the brothers Homick to Neil and Stewart Woodman. And who is better at making connections than the phone company?
The police made a very detailed study of payphone records from payphones in the area surrounding the factory out in the valley. And they found that all of these phone booths were within a mile or so of the plastics factory. If you plotted them on a map, it was almost a perfect circle with the factory at the center. The problem with the plot was the boys used their company credit card when they made these calls from the phone booths. Pretty smart. If they had a roll of quarters, they probably would have got away with it.
Ma Bell, witness for the prosecution. In the end, it was the quiet one who started singing. When cops picked up Mike Dominguez, he learned from them that his future looked bleak. Gas chamber bleak. That is, unless he had something to trade. It turned out he did. He gives up the whole enchilada. Motive, means, and opportunity. The cops have their homicidal trifecta.
He told us that he and Steve had flown into Los Angeles a couple days before the murder. They had traced the route with Robert Homick.
Marvin Wolf follows every step of the trial. In fact, he goes on to write a book about the Woodman's blood feud.
When these guys come in and sit down from a distance, they're just, you know, sort of indistinct figures. But if you sit there and you look at their faces, the hair on the back of your head has to stand up. These are animals. There's something less than human about them. That was my gut feeling about them. These guys scared the hell out of me.
There's only one question left. Who's gonna crack? The jellyfish or the snake?
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth?
It's the jellyfish. Stewart hasn't the spine to face death row. He offers to trade Neil's ass for his own life. His confession runs for 10 hours, and he lays it all out on a platter. His version, anyhow.
You know, my wife and I were both involved, called as witnesses, and I was totally shocked when Stewart was convicted. Then I was flabbergasted. He then turned around and identified his brother as being his co-conspirator.
Stewart testified that Neil was the brains behind the operation, adding insult to a life of incarceration. In the end, Neil and Stewart both got life without parole.
As a rabbi, I'm always teaching people that they need to not let their circumstances define who they are, that whether the circumstances are good or the circumstances are horrific, you can find people who've transcended them and who've made different choices. And, you know, and that here is one of the issues, that they had they had everything. These guys, Neil and Stewart, they had everything. They had money, they had beautiful wives, they had wonderful kids, they had great families. They had everything that to throw away, and they did.
I think her insurance policy and the hatred for the father was the reason that the boys got in so deep in money matters that let's take out mom, collect the money, we hate dad, and we'll take out dad too, and then we've got everything. We've got the company, we've got the insurance money, and we're out of debt, and we own the company, and we're good.
Stewart and Neil gave their father back what he gave them. He took their lives from them in a certain way. Yeah, it's true he gave them many things, but he also took away a lot of things. And their revenge was to take his life.
I had no feelings about my father. Just no feelings about him. Just my kids won't know my mother. They'll never be able to see her. I'll never be able to see her again. And that I got upset about.
But you paid 2 people to have her killed.
I know what I did. I know what I did.
The lookout team, Mike Dominguez and Robert Homick, got 25 to life. Steve Homick, the trigger man, he got sentenced to death. But 25 years later, he's still on the waiting list at San Quentin. Stewart has asked for parole and been turned down a half a dozen times. Neil still says he's innocent, but that's between him and God. For him, and for the rest of that sorry lot, every day can be a day of atonement. And may God have mercy on them, because it doesn't look like the state of California is going to get around to it.